and the rest of the world. Honorable, from where you sit as a user, but also as a politician and leader in society, do you think that this flow of information between Africa and the world presents any challenges or opportunities for internet users in Africa?
Of course, it creates an opportunity, but for me, let me just talk about the biggest risk that I see. And this is on the issue of revenue sharing, because data is money. Data is a potential revenue. You know, these international organizations, multinational tech companies are using the data they have to generate income. How are they generating income? It could be one, through developing new interventions, two, selling that income to different other international organizations. Now, we in Africa remaining to be in darkness of that, that is a risk. And at the moment, we don't have Africa inborn or made in Africa interventions which can store data in the cloud, satellites, etc. Everything that we're using is international, which means we must make sure that we have this discussion, and even INJ can play that role of bringing us as legislators into same rooms and having conversations with these big multinational tech companies to address such issues. What is their social responsibility of how they are managing and storing our data? From very simple things. Any app that you download these days, they ask you for so much information. Opening an email, they ask you for so much information. And then suddenly you start getting emails of promotions which you didn't ask for. Is that the right way of data management? Is that data governance? Is that data protection? So those are questions that we have to start addressing now, so that jointly we can come up with mechanisms that can ensure that there will be a global, continental, regional, national regulatory framework that can truly protect data, but at the same time enable the flow of cross-border data flow.
Very, very interesting submission from you, Honorable. And indeed, as an African, I feel like, can we live up that point when we shall have our data better utilized? And from your suggestion, from your submission, Honorable, I gather that you seem to be advocating that we should have a continental kind of body responsible for example, regulating competition issues on data flows in Africa. Do you think this conversation is worth having at this level, but even at any other forum, of having a body responsible for competition issues in this data ecosystem?
You know, when we're talking about competition, I won't just maybe zoom it just on competition, but we need to have a broader discussion on revenue sharing. Because when we're talking about multinational tech companies, they're generating a lot of income from Africa, and Africa is a big market. But that revenue that is being generated, are we able to track it? Are we able to know what's happening? Are we able to know the revenue generated that is originating from African countries? Those are discussions that we need to have. And I believe it's part and parcel of cross-border data flow. Because how am I going to know if WISA, your organization is in, for example, you're in Paris? How am I going to know you have extracted data from Lusaka in Zambia and you're utilizing it to generate revenue in Paris? That is a cross-border data flow issue. So what I can say, INJ, you have opened a Pandora box. So let's buckle up and make sure that we indeed do something that will result into a tangible results into helping and strengthening the cross-border data flow.
Thank you very much, Honorable. You remind me of the times of colonialism, where, of course, the Europeans came to Africa and they got gold, they got timber, they got all these valuables and took them back into their countries. They used them to build their economies. And up to now, many years after independence, the African countries that were the original owners of all those resources are still yearning for donor aid from the same country. So I think This is the time for all of us as Africans to begin rethinking how we approach data management. Are we exposing ourselves to the same conditions that our forefathers exposed themselves to during the times of ivory, times of gold and timber? I think the conversation needs to move to the next level and ensure that we protect the rights of Africans in the data economy. And for sure, I'm sure this report will capture that as one of the key recommendations that Africa needs to seriously tackle to address data unfairness from the Africans. Honorable, moving to our next part of the conversation, there is a feeling among a number of African actors that many of the policies that we have in Africa on data governance are largely influenced by the Western powers, and there is little attention being paid to the African solutions and African needs. Honorable, in your view, do you think that is a fair perception? And if it is true, what can we do to change it?
Sorry, can you repeat that part? My network glitched a little bit.
So I was saying that there is a feeling among many African actors that many of the policies we have on internet governance, on data, are largely influenced and biased by the Western powers. And this, to many Africans, they feel like it does not represent enough the will, the interest, and the desires of the Africans. Do you think, as an African, that these policies are not really for us? They are largely from the European and for the Europeans?
Not entirely, because even though certain acts or legislation has started from European, what the most important thing is for African countries to ensure that they localize, and whatever legislation that is prepared is relevant for the country. It's relevant for the country, and not to do a copy paste approach.
Yes, I think that is important, because for sure the feeling about copying and pasting, even on the African continent, a number of countries copy one law from one country without taking care of the local desires of the people. And Honorable, talking about not copying, do you think that as Africa we have any common narrative on issues of data protection that we can front as the African position on these matters?
Definitely, and especially in Africa, I think, I'm sure that you're aware, we have the African Network of Data Protection Commissioners, which is currently being, the president is the Ghanaian Data Protection Commissioner. So there are mechanisms that are already in place to make sure that as a continent, we have alignment amongst ourselves when it comes to data protection. And this is very much in line with the African Union data protection framework.
Okay. So, but do you see from the African Union data protection framework and the digital transformation policy, do you see anything featured in there that you can say this is for Africa? This is what brings all Africans together, and this is the African narrative with respect to data protection or internet governance generally, or it is the same copy-paste like you noted earlier?
I think there is avenue towards that, and that's why you're seeing even an intervention like the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance. The aim is to make sure that we work together and we have a similar we have an alignment amongst ourselves continentally, but also in our respective countries. And I believe an intervention such as this from INJ will work towards contributing towards that.
Yes, I think indeed that's true, because indeed the challenges are not unique to Africa. So indeed we need to have a multi-stakeholder approach to all these processes. Honorable, we are moving to a subject that is also slightly sensitive in terms of culture of Africa. Do you think that the existing data policies and frameworks on internet and data generally have any cultural insensitivities to Africa? Do you see any policies that you think are not in harmony with African cultural sensitivity? and how can we avoid those going forward?
I think, like I said earlier, first of all, for the case of Tanzania, where the Ministry of responsible for ICT has just tabled a bill for the data protection, and each and every African country has its own constitution, and the constitution has is the fund creates the foundation of values of that country and cultural norms of the respective country. And I think in whatever case, governments and citizens always strive to ensure that whatever that is in the constitution is indeed upholded with highest regard. So I would most certainly in that sense conclude by saying that it's important to make sure this is not just in the Data Protection Act, in any act that we develop, it's in adherence to also the fundamental norms and values that are embedded in our constitutions.
Thank you very much. Africans, we need indeed to see how we can embed our values in all these policy frameworks. Thank you very much. And then, Honorable, we also have some concern whether Africans have realized the value of the data that they actually generate to all these digital and tech companies. Do you think a number of Africans have appreciated the social and economic value of their data? And if they have not, how can we improve this awareness?
I think, first of all, one of the issues that we also need to recognize, I'm sure all of you know, you're very much aware of the Malabo Convention, and whereby, all African countries were supposed to have data protection acts in place, and we're still lagging behind. So strategic efforts are needed to ensure that we push our governments to have data protection acts, and such a way can be through the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance and other interventions. But at the same time, jointly, CSOs, governments, politicians also have a role to play in building the capacity of the people, of knowing each time someone asks you for your data, before you give it, you have to think and ask yourself basic questions. What is this data going to be used for? How is it stored? How are you going to be protected? Those basic things we need to make the public aware, and this can start from the age of adolescence all the way to ourselves.
Thank you very much. The audience, I'm seeing a number of you posting a few comments. I want to invite you to share your comments and questions in the chat room. Feel free to post a question that you want to pose to either myself, Tracy, or Honorable Nema. We'll be very happy to answer your questions that you will post in the chat room. And Honorable Nema, as we get towards the end of this discussion, from our recent survey, a number of respondents noted that data is a critical factor in dealing with gender issues in Africa. A number of respondents were of the view that through data collection, Africa can get statistics that they can use to come up with deliberate interventions to address gender inequality and address the existing gender imbalances within Africa. Do you think this is a valid view from our respondents?
When we're talking about data protection, it's not just it's to make sure that we can have an understanding of areas of gender inequality, gender issues, but also inclusion of people with special needs, people with disabilities, visual impairments, etc. And even in that sense, it's also important to make sure that their data is also not misused or used or used in a manner in which is against our fundamental norms, culture, and laws, etc. So I believe the issue of data protection, but particularly cross-border data flows, it's one which can be easily overlooked but it's a very critical point, especially when we're pushing for regional integration. We're pushing for the Africa free trade zone on agricultural areas, etc. This becomes a pertinent issue that we need to discuss.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nema. And from your perspective as a politician, I know many African countries have for many years been talking about promoting gender equality, emancipating women, enabling girls to go to school. Can you share with us some initiatives that you think that we can use in the digital era and use the digital platforms to invite more politicians, more policymakers to begin using the digital tools to improve the gender situation in Africa? How can we do this using the digital platforms and data?
I think one of the first things that we need to make sure is up until now, there has been a gap in the sense that tech and digital has been developing in a silo. And it's important now that we bridge that gap. It's important now that as tech, we also make deliberate efforts to engage legislators, parliamentarians, politicians, etc. Because it is very clear that if we want to achieve that enabling environment, if we want to achieve the cross-border data flow picture that ING is talking about, you need legislators. But if you keep legislators aside, then we as legislators are going to end up possibly creating a regulatory framework that will hinder the cross-border data flow.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that response. And I think that brings us to the end of this discussion. But before we thank you very well for your contributions to this, do you have any comments you want to make to the African watching or anybody following this conversation about what we need to do to improve our data governance status in Africa?
Thank you very much. So my concluding remark is going to be a challenge to ING. So get ready, buckle up, because I am of the opinion that, and I reaffirm this, once this report is launched, the cross-border data flow report is launched, we need to make a deliberate and strategic effort to capacitate parliamentarians, and we can pick a few countries within the African context. You know, we have 5 regional blocks. That can be an option, and to create champions of this cross-border data flow. And with that, create an alignment with the existing data protection acts in the respective countries. That's number one. Number 2 is to create an avenue for a dialogue of understanding and starting the tough discussion of the social responsibility of these international multinational tech companies. And with that, with those 2 things, I think your hands are going to be very, very full. But as always, you can count on my support and my availability and commitment to this topic, as well as the entire African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nema. I'm seeing before we sign out, there's a hand from Mr. Bonselat Jokolab from Banjul. I don't know if you are able to join and ask your question or comment before we can let go Honorable Nema and everybody on the platform. Mr. Poncelat? Poncelat, your hand is up. Please unmute yourself and tell us who you are and share your question or comment. It seems we've lost him. So on that note, I thank you very much, Honorable Nema, for sparing your time of your busy schedule to participate in this online discussion about this very important topic. I want to thank you on my behalf and on behalf of the ING team, but also to thank FIFAfrica and the organizers of the FIFA event for making it possible for us to have this conversation. We believe that the views you've expressed today will shape and inform our next steps as we conclude the report on this critical report that will certainly inform and shape digital and governance in Africa.
Thank you very much to Honorable Nima. Thank you very much for your time. I've taken two keywords back with me: be deliberate and be strategic, and absolutely agree. And I look forward for us to be speaking with you for future collaborations. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Honorable. Thank you.
Waiswa, thank you as well for moderating the session with the interview with Honorable Nima. I did promise to share with you all a video, but before I go into that, I just wanted to allow the opportunity for anybody to ask questions, either in the chat room or from the or in person or live. So I'll open the floor for for a minute. And there's one attendee already that, here we go. I think it's Poncelet again, but we seem to have lost him. So I'm just gonna allow you to talk, Poncelet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tracy. The last time the mic just went off for the great work you're doing. I'm just trying to think with all the issues around data, whether your civil society, whether your government and Honorable Nima coming in a member of parliament, whether you'll be doing anything during the coming IGF, especially I'm speaking in my capacity as the chair for the UNECA task force on bringing young Africans IGF, about how data can be used, whether there's any session, whether it's formal or informal, because it's very important to discuss. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your question, Poncelet. And you bringing up something very timely, because I was going to share with everybody some of our upcoming activities. So since you mentioned the IGF, I'm happy to share that we will be launching the report for cross-border digital policies for Africa on the 28th of November. During a session from 5 till 6, there will be more information about that, but this is a session that will be open to all. So I would hope that your network as well would be participating in that. And there's also still an opportunity, because you were there as well with us in Malawi for the African Internet Governance Forum and on data collection. And there is still an opportunity to provide data to us to complete the online survey that we had shared regarding some of the questions that Waiswa has posed to Honorable Nima. There's still an opportunity to do that. And on the 25th of October, there will be a key findings workshop on everything that we have collected in terms of data for the report, which will be then shared at the end of November in Addis Ababa. So I hope that responds a little bit to your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Tracy.
Welcome. So I'm assuming that you will be there.
Yes, I'll be there in full. Yeah.
Excellent. Are there any other questions from the floor? I see one in the Q&A. Oh, thank you. You're welcome, Poncelet. So at this point, I would also like to share with you then the video which I promised. So I'll go ahead and do that. And you let me know if you can see my screen. So here we go.
She didn't capture mine.
Can you see it? Okay, wait. Can you all see my screen?
To drive economic growth and job creation across sectors and support global and regional interconnection by implementing cross-border digital policies that harness the opportunities these technologies have to offer, African countries can improve well-being and stakeholder cooperation is fundamental. Since 2012, the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, I&JPN, has been at the forefront of meaningful multi-stakeholder engagement of regional voices, and including African perspectives is now more important than ever. This is why I&JPN, with support from GIZ, is launching a 2-year project that will leverage existing networks of actors across the continent to frame, map, and address cross-border digital policy issues across Africa. Stakeholders from the continent have a vital part to play in addressing cross-border digital policies with a shared voice for Africans by Africans. Over 2 years, the project will have 3 phases. 1. Knowledge dialogue and consultations. 2. A dedicated status report that will map and showcase legal and technical approaches to cross-border digital policies in Africa. 3. Outreach and learning modules. Knowledge dialogue and consultations. There will be 2 knowledge dialogue and consultation workshops with African experts to support knowledge exchange within and across countries. These recurring workshops will allow to share knowledge, be acknowledged among peers, promote interaction with international stakeholders, and crowdsource priorities for the content of the status report. Status report on cross-border digital policy in Africa. Next, we will develop the first status report on legal and technical approaches to cross-border digital policies in Africa. This will be done through continent-wide data collection, including interviews and in-depth analysis of existing knowledge. It will serve as a valuable baseline for progress in the region and beyond, and represent the amplified and shared perspective of African digital policy practitioners. Outreach and learning modules. The key findings of the report will inform capacity building workshops, learning modules, and the basis of the findings of the knowledge dialogue and status report, tailor-made for African policymakers. By connecting African experts to co-create the pioneering status report on cross-border digital policy, we aim to provide a complementary platform for Africans to reframe and also broaden the international policy debate on data and cross-border data flows. Join us and be part of a conversation on digital cross-border policy that aims to amplify on the interests of over 1 billion people on the African continent. 1. Express your interest to contribute to the report and/or be part of the knowledge dialogue workshops to help shape the content of the status report. By doing so, you will also join our global knowledge network of hundreds of practitioners and data contributors. 2. Partner with us to share updates of this process and engagement opportunities with your networks. 3. Learn more. www.internetjurisdiction.net/Africa.
Thank you for paying attention to our video. I hope that it gives you an overview, a very good overview of the project process and where we are. I shared with you already the timeline that we have. And one of the key activities mentioned to you is the key findings. And that's phase 3 of the work that is ongoing for cross-border digital policies for Africa. And in phase 3, that is the data collection part of what we're doing. So I'd like again at this stage to open up the floor, but also to invite you to share with us via email any questions that you may have, and we'd be happy to answer those. So while we have our moderators still here, perhaps there are some questions that you had on there for him from the floor.
Yes, thank you, Tracy.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Tracy, for sharing the video. The audience, please feel free to post your questions or to unmute yourself and pose the question to the rest of us so we can provide any possible answers, but also share comments and recommendations on how we can make this report more relevant to our needs as a continent. We welcome such recommendations and views on also how we can improve. As we told you in the beginning, this report is for Africa, and therefore it is in our interest that we improve it, we share our perspective, our thoughts on how best we can improve the digital ecosystem on the continent. I think so far in the chat room, I'm not seeing any questions.
No, and since we do not have any questions so far, I hope that the information that you've received has been well. Today has been a conversation with Honorable Nima Lungangira, who shared her perspectives on the exercise that we're doing for the data collection. And again, the data collection is it's still open for you to share with us your perspectives, and you can do that by responding, writing to me directly. And so without further ado, then I will give you back 40 minutes of your time and say thank you for joining. Thank you to the hosts, the organizers for this event. I'm sorry that I'm not in Lusaka, being from Lusaka myself, but I look forward to watching some of the other sessions that will be going on as well. So thank you very much for your time. And with that, I hand back over to the hosts. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, participants, for joining in us today. I think, Tracy, maybe you could share the link to the questionnaire in the chat, or maybe so that people can pick it on from there. But we do also encourage participants who are not physically in Lusaka to check out our website and follow the other sessions that will be going on tomorrow physically here. I'm gonna share the agenda link right now. I hope people can be able to see it, but I think I put it here because I was told weren't able to. They weren't able to type chats. They weren't able to contribute to the chat room. So yeah, just feel free to share on Twitter the hashtag FIFAfrica22 or 2022, and we'll be happy to capture all the other questions in the coming sessions tomorrow. So thank you so much, Tracy, and Waiswa and Honorable Nima for this session, and have a good evening from here.
Thank you, and have a good evening, Lillian.
Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, Waiswa. And thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Private sectors.